Over the weekend, The New Yorker, with reporting from Ronan Farrow, broke a story indicating that a second woman has come forward with allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. So these allegations are by a woman named Deborah Ramirez, and she went to Yale with Brett Kavanaugh, and she admits that, the alleged assault took place a long time ago, and so there are parts that she doesn't clearly remember. However, what she did relay to the reporters in this case, she says she does remember, and we'll see if these claims get investigated. But let me give you the details. So Deborah Ramirez remembers that Kavanaugh had exposed himself at a drunken dormitory party, thrust his penis in her face, and caused her to touch it without her consent as she pushed him away. She was quoted in the story as saying, "I wasn't going to touch a penis until I was married. I was embarrassed and ashamed and humiliated." Brett was laughing. "I can still see his face and his hips coming forward, like when you pull up your pants." And so she says that she never came forward or told anyone about this because she was embarrassed. She was also drinking, so she was concerned that people would go after her rather than look into these allegations. And it seems as though those who support Kavanaugh today are using that against her, and we'll get to the reactions later. The claim dates to the 1983-1984 academic school year when Kavanaugh was a freshman at Yale University. The offices of at least 4 Democratic senators have received information about the allegation, and at least 2 have begun investigating it. So the New Yorker notes that the Senate had known about this, at least the Judiciary Committee had known about this last week. And the reaction from Republicans was to rush the confirmation. And that explains why all of a sudden there was this ultimatum indicating that there was a very strict deadline for Dr. Blasey to agree to testify. They later, changed that ultimatum, and now it's being reported that Dr. Blasey is likely to testify on Thursday of this week. However, with these new allegations, Senator Dianne Feinstein is calling for a postponement for that hearing in order to do further investigation, and they're also calling for the FBI to get involved.
So if the hearings do happen on Thursday, we will cover it live and give you commentary on the spot as we're showing it to you guys on tyt.com/live. And now let's get to the heart of the Ramirez allegations here. If true and can be shown well enough for people to understand that it is true, obviously it would be the end of Kavanaugh. And now there are some progressive groups that are actually calling for him to be impeached from his current position on the federal bench. Now, she clearly says that she had trouble recollecting some of this and that she was very intoxicated that night. So that to me cuts in 2 different directions. One is that, well, okay, then you have to be a little wary about what she's saying because she's not entirely positive. On the other hand, which person who's looking to set him up politically would admit that? If you were trying to do a hatchet job, you would never say that. You would say, I'm positive and come forward yourself, etc. So now the second part of the question of whether you believe her or not, and look, these are the things that we all look to as we read these stories. And for example, look, even before I get to that, let me just say, if the story isn't true, that and Kavanaugh got blocked on that basis, that would be really, really troubling. It would be devastating. And it would be devastating because there was an injustice done to one person. It'd also be devastating to the cause of protecting women, because then it would give people carte blanche to say, oh, we knew all of it wasn't true, et cetera. So that's why it's really important for us to the best of our abilities to discern, is it true, is it not true, is it relevant, et cetera, right? So then that gets to the witnesses. So Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer broke this story. They're immaculately careful with these stories. That doesn't mean they get everyone right. But they did take a lot of care and have defended themselves about this particular story to try to reach out to all the different witnesses. Now, again, this is what the FBI should be doing, so we could all have a better sense of it, whether he did do it or didn't do it, so we can make clear decisions. But now reporters are chasing it down. New York Times, and all of a sudden, the Trump administration's best friend, and I don't say that derisively towards the New York Times, I say it towards the Trump administration, because the New York Times is just simply trying to report out a story. Say that they talked to about a dozen people who did not recollect this at all. And so now the Trump administration doesn't think they're the failing New York Times. They think that they're the brilliant New York Times and are spreading that to everyone who will consider it. Farrow and Mayer at the New Yorker said, yes, we also talked to dozens of witnesses, and a lot of them did not remember this story, including a really good friend of Deborah Ramirez. On the other hand, several people did remember this story.
That's right. And by the way, there was one individual quoted in the New Yorker, someone who identified as a close friend, former close friend of Ramirez's, and said, you know, we were close for 10 years and she never brought this up. First, let me just be clear about something. Just because someone didn't bring up a sexual assault doesn't mean it didn't happen. It could be something that this individual was very embarrassed about, just didn't feel comfortable opening up about. So let's just take that into consideration. But another thing to take into consideration is that that friend who was close with her for 10 years is now married to a man who was allegedly present when this alleged sexual assault took place. So there's a possibility that that person wants to protect her husband. Again, this is all analysis that's being done by me, by other people in the media, and the fact of the matter is it's all irrelevant. What matters is having a nonpartisan FBI investigation into this to get to the heart of the truth. But that is something that Republicans do not want to do. In fact, when they heard these allegations, they wanted to rush the confirmation of Kavanaugh. And they do not want the FBI investigation. I'm inclined to believe the accusations, right? And I'm starting to think that Republicans in the Senate are inclined to believe the accusations because they refuse any investigation into these allegations.
On this allegation, to me, there are a couple of things that go in different directions. And so everybody gets to make up their own mind, and obviously a lot of people come into it with their own biases, and I hope that some don't. And I hope that I'm one of the people who don't come at it with a bias, because I always think, what if it was a Democrat or a liberal appointee and this was happening? Okay, so that leads me to one person who does remember this incident. It is an unnamed person, but Mayer and the Trump propaganda on the fake news media is ridiculous. Mayer and Farrow aren't going to make up someone and call them an anonymous source. The reason Trump believes that could happen is because he used to do it. He would pretend to be someone else, John Miller, John Barron, and be an anonymous source for people. So he thinks, well, everybody's probably a serial pathological liar like myself. So my jury's in on Trump. That's not the issue here. So on this, a classmate actually did talk to Mayer and Farrow, and this is what he had to say. Here is the New Yorker quote. A classmate of Ramirez's said that another student told him about the incident either on the night of the party or in the next day or two. The classmate said that he is, quote, 100% sure that he was told at the time that Kavanaugh was the student who exposed himself to Ramirez. Well, that's number one, pretty clear. Again, it's just one witness, but Farrow and Mayer say that he independently recalled many of the same details offered by Ramirez. They did not coordinate, so these reporters are great reporters. They said, okay, what do you remember being the details? And that person had the same details that Ramirez had in her story, and that person apparently added, quote, I've known this all along. It's been on my mind all these years. When his name came up, it was a big deal. So the only thing that where I go on the other hand is that she says she had trouble remembering. That's tough. That's a tough thing to say. Hey, there's a super serious accusation against someone at a pivotal time, and you're telling me you had to take 6 days to remember it exactly right. I get where a lot of people will go, bah, no, I'm out. That's not good enough, right? But it is independently confirmed by this other person, and she has apparently a reputation for it by even the people who say I don't remember that story. Say, oh no, Deborah Ramirez is super honest. like known for being over the top honest, and she shows it by saying, I was drunk and I had trouble remembering. No political hack would ever say that if their job was to go get Kavanaugh. So she's not a political hack, that I'm certain of in that sense. She might be a Democrat, but this is not a hatchet job that she invented. Is she remembering right? I think that's a legitimate question, and then you have this evidence to help you make up your mind on that.
For me, what also happens to be pretty telling is her willingness to come forward with these allegations in a pretty honest way, meaning that she's admitting to, things that maybe she doesn't remember, admitting to the fact that she was drunk at the time. But more importantly, the fact that she's willing to come forward knowing the way that Dr. Blasi's been treated, the fact that she's had to move out of her home, she's had to relocate her family, and she has to hire private security because the threats against her have been terrifying. And she's also seen the way that Dr. Blasi's been dragged through the mud by Republicans. And the fact that she's willing to put herself out there with these allegations, it doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it's something to consider. And again, the most important thing to do is to conduct an investigation. And that, again, is something that Republicans do not want to do.
And understand the politics of this too, which is that, yes, the Republicans don't want to do the investigation because they're afraid it's going to get past the midterm elections, then they might lose the Senate, and then it might not get Kavanaugh confirmed. The Democrats, for the same reason, do want the investigation, partly to find out the truth, but partly to delay the proceedings. That is a real political concern of the Democrats, so I'll take that into account as well. For me, I think, man, if it isn't true and you buried this guy and you didn't do an FBI investigation, or you put him on the court and it wasn't true and we never find out, that still is terrible for him, because forever a huge percentage of this country is going to think that he did it. And if it isn't true, I would want, if it was me, I'd be like, my God, get in there, talk to, here's my witness one, witness two. Look, and nobody's recollection is perfect from 36 years ago, et cetera, but I got to get this off my name, right?
Absolutely. I know that if I were dealing with false accusations, I would 100% want someone to investigate it to ensure that my name gets cleared. And it's just strange that he doesn't want that. Kavanaugh, for his part, has responded by saying, I won't be intimidated, I won't withdraw as a nominee for the Supreme Court. And so he continues to deny the allegations. He wants to keep moving forward with the hearings and get confirmed. But let's say best case scenario for him, he does get confirmed without any investigation. Is he comfortable knowing that there's a huge portion of the country that either doesn't know what the truth is, they're kind of, on the fence, or are convinced that he is someone who's committed sexual assault? This is a serious thing. By the way, attempted rape is a serious crime, and we're not calling for a criminal investigation, but I don't think that anyone who has committed any type of serious crime should ever make it into our justice system, but more importantly, in the highest court in the country.
Yeah, and one more, some degree of strike against him. You weighed again at whatever you think is appropriate. He said that these charges by Ramirez were, quote, smears, pure and simple. So he's now super aggressively fighting back. Now, if you thought they were smears, I would fight back super aggressively, and you probably would too. But as I read Ramirez's story, I thought, no, this definitely happened to her. I'm not 100% sure that it was Brett Kavanaugh, but she didn't make up the whole story, and she's not doing it for political reasons. Otherwise, she wouldn't, do all the things that I described here, and she wouldn't be hesitant. And by the way, another thing you should know, and this cuts in two directions as well. The Democrats apparently went fishing here, trying to find someone because they had heard of a story at Yale where Kavanaugh had done this. Number one, that apparently exists. Enough people have heard about it that the Democrats found out about it. Number two, they then went and tried to find who it happened to. And through that process, Ramirez gets revealed. So that is a strike, that is a thing in her favor, because she didn't come out here and go, it was me, I'm doing it. That Kavanaugh, I don't want him on the court. She's not doing any of that. She got dragged into it. You want to count it as a strike against the Democratic Party for going fishing and finding this person? Okay, fine. And that seems like that's what happened. But the question is it true? If I'm Kavanaugh and I read this story, of course you're going to get mad if it wasn't you. You're going to be super mad, right? But at the same time, I'd read it and go, she definitely thinks it happened to her. okay? So then the question is, who was it? Because I didn't do it. And I'm not sure I'd go out there and say, this is a smear through and through. I said, look, man, that's a terrible thing for that to happen to her. And maybe we should look into figuring out who did it, because it definitely wasn't me.
Yeah.
Unless he just thinks, nah, she's just a super, super clever liar, and this was a political trick all along. But this fact pattern doesn't seem to match that.
Right. Again, there should be the FBI involved in this. They should look into it and try to figure out whether or not there's any corroborating evidence, whether or not any of these allegations are true. It's ridiculous that it's now up to people in the media to, do the investigation and figure out what the truth is. By the way, one other thing I wanted to bring up. Last week, we played a video featuring Senator Mazie Hirono, and she had asked Brett Kavanaugh, have you ever been accused of, I don't remember the exact wording, but she asked if he ever was accused of sexual assault as an adult. And I thought that was weird wording, right? And now I'm realizing, it probably had to do with these allegations, because remember, these allegations are from when he was a freshman at Yale, when he was an adult. The allegations that Dr. Blasey brought forward happened when they were in high school, when he was 17. And so who knows, what's happening behind the scenes. You're right, it does seem like Democrats are on a fishing expedition trying to find more accusers, but nonetheless, I don't want this to be a guessing game. I want this to be something that's looked into by nonpartisan professionals.
And the exact question was, have you committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature? And that was in context of when he was an adult. And so at the Yale incident, he would have been an adult, and it certainly would have qualified as that. And he said no, that he had not. So one super last thing on this is that, look, Kavanaugh has now been caught saying several things that didn't prove to be true. So that context is also relevant. And so now in the context of a guy who's swearing up and down that certain things are the case, and it turns out they're not the case, now you have this situation, well, it makes him less credible. And obviously every new accuser makes him even less credible, and both sides know that, and hence why the Democrats want to see if there are more accusers, and now Michael Avenatti is talking about he has another one, and the Republicans think we got to get this thing done right now, so that there are no more accusers, and he's on the court. I don't care if he did it or didn't do it. Which way is he voting? He's voting with corporations. He's voting against Roe versus Wade. He's in. Go, go, go. And that appears to be the case, except for one caveat. Unless they think it's going to cost them the election, because the thing that any politician cares most about is their own seat, and so that's the calculations being played out this week. And actually, one super duper last thing is that in the post game today, I want to talk about the context of Georgetown Prep, where Kavanaugh came from, and how they would apparently target one woman at a time and try to get them intoxicated. And they called it and the thing that they concocted was jungle juice, etc. But I want to talk about that. It's even separate from this story. Obviously, it's related to this story, but that concept of guys trying to do that, it just merits a further discussion. Let's do it in the post game. You get that by being a member at tyt.com/join. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.